leisure travel was, in a sense, a British invention. This was mainly due to economic and social factors. Britain was the first country to become fully industrialized, and industrial society offered growing numbers of people time for leisure. This, coupled with improvements in transport, especially the railways, meant that large numbers of people could get to holiday resorts in a very short time. Modern mass tourism of a sort we can easily recognize today began in 1841, when Thomas Cook organized the first package tour, in which everything was included in the cost: travel, hotel and entertainment. To cater for the large numbers of new holidaymakers, holiday camps were established, both on the coast and in the countryside, and they became immensely popular. Their popularity declined, however, with the rise of cheap overseas tours, which gave many people their first opportunity to travel abroad. When societies were still mostly rural and agricultural, waste disposal was hardly an issue, partly because people tended to make use of everything and partly because there was plenty of space to bury rubbish. It was when societies became predominantly urban and industrial that problems arose, mainly to do with health. City authorities had a hard time trying to find efficient ways of getting rid of all the rubbish. One of these was to get people to sort out their rubbish into different types, just as these days we are encouraged to separate our rubbish into different categories for easier removal and recycling. So, for example, kitchen rubbish was set aside and used for feeding animals. However, fears of disease put an end to that. In fact, it wasn't until the 20th century that all waste was simply thrown together and plowed into landfills. Archery, the practice or art of shooting with a bow and arrow, has played an important part in English history, being the main weapon of the foot soldier and instrumental in winning many battles in wars with the French, with whom we seem to be constantly at war during the Middle Ages. The English favored the longbow over the short bow and the crossbow, the latter being the main firearm of militaries on the European continent. The crossbow fired a metal bolt released by a trigger, rather like a gun, and had the longest range of any of the bows, but the main advantage of the longbow was its accuracy. The importance placed on archery is illustrated by the fact that medieval kings in England encouraged the practice, and one of them, Edward III, went so far as to ban all sports on Sundays and holidays except archery. Because there were no standing armies in those days, and in the event of war rulers had to call on the populace, everything was done to make sure there were large numbers of competent, if not expert archers, to recruit. So far in our discussion of chemical reactions, we have assumed that these reactions only go in one direction, the forward direction, from left to right as we read it in an equation. That's why our arrow points from left to right. Reactants react together to make products. However, this is not exactly how things occur in nature. In fact, practically every chemical reaction is reversible, meaning the products can also react together to reform the reactants that they were made of. So instead of writing that single arrow facing from left to right, a more appropriate symbol would be a double arrow, one going from left to right and one going from right to left. Reactants are continuously reacting to form products. But at the same time as those products are formed, they remake the reactants. They're both going simultaneously, forming each other. This is what we would call a state of equilibrium. I think the importance of creativity today really reflects a fundamental shift in the nature of the economy. In the old days, wealth was created because, in the industrial era, you manufactured something, you got economies of scale, you had long production runs, you were really efficient, you could get a Model T, any color just so long as it was black. Right? So there was standardization. And there was a whole set of assumptions about how to manage, how to create an organization, a typical kind of hierarchical organization, to make sure that things ran smoothly. Well, that may be great for a relatively stable era of history, relatively stable, but now things are fundamentally unstable, and so we need fewer economies of scale and more economies of discovery. Which means that the management approach, the organizational approach, has got to shift as well.